Boris Johnson will now, possibly because of his own experience, be taking obesity in this country as an incredibly serious problem that it always was, but we've never really dealt with it. And now, Dr. Hilary, the evidence is, isn't it, that coronavirus can be deadly to those who carry more body fat.
That's right. If you look at the statistics, people who are overweight or obese are more likely to be admitted to hospital and suffer more severe consequences of the coronavirus. The mortality rate is higher as well. They're more likely to have diabetes and heart disease. So obesity, as you say, we've known for years, has these effects on the body. But it causes an inflammation within the body, as well as the diabetes and the heart disease, which you can is more tangible. You can see it and feel it and measure it. But the inflammation in the body is something that's less measurable. But it's the inflammation which the coronavirus particularly targets. And that's why our Prime Minister is now saying we need to regard obesity much more seriously in this country and have much more effective measures at helping the population to curb that and become no longer one of the fattest populations in the Western world.
Because we were looking at, if you looked at the difference in demographics between here and Italy, for example, you know, when obviously we're now not showing those comparisons in death rates between countries around the world now at those briefings. But you saw, you know, we were tracking Italy all the way along, and there was a question over, hang on, they've got an older population than the UK has. If you look at the obesity rate, the UK has twice the obese rate amongst the population than Italy does, and that's got to be a defining factor in why we are dealing with it so badly here. And if you look at South Korea, for example, their obesity rate is very low, and we're all talking about how governments have dealt with it, but it may well be a much deeper issue that is regarded as to why we have been so badly affected in this country.
And USA take note.
Yes.
I mean, they've got a massive problem with 86,000 deaths so far and rising. We don't have quite as an older population as Italy, where they have a lot of intergenerational care as well, lots of children mixing with grandparents. But Italy don't have our obesity rate, so that is a major factor for us. We also have quite an old population, but there are many factors. There's diabetes, there's the obesity, there's the age, there's the pre-existing conditions. We're learning more about the virus, but definitely the Prime Minister is right that obesity needs to be tackled, not just now for coronavirus, but for the future, for all these other things as well.
Diabetes is a big one, isn't it? Is it 26% of deaths have been people who have died have diabetes?
Roughly a quarter,
well.
That's right.
Ian Dale has got diabetes. We'll be talking to him, as you always do on a Friday, and he posted saying he's not leaving isolation anytime soon. Because he's really rightly concerned about how his diabetes could affect his way of dealing with coronavirus. So Dr. Hilary talks a lot about, don't you, Hills, about the infection, how infectious coronavirus is. And
on surfaces and not just person to person.
You know, we try and understand the contagious nature of it, but an experiment like that is really, really stark.
It visually demonstrates how easy it is for one pair of hands and one set of utensils to be transferred to faces and then to other items that people touch, and before you know it, the whole room is potentially contaminated. So it's a very good demonstration of why we need to thoroughly wash our hands on a frequent basis, use hand sanitizer, and just be wary that what we need to do is still have this mindset that we could be carrying the virus, the person we're talking to could have the virus, however well we know them. And just, I mean, that's what the Be Alert message really means. It's just being aware and always sensitive to the fact that we could be carrying the virus, they could be. Just be careful.
But it won't necessarily help all those teachers who are still battling with going back into school, because when you see something like that and you've got, you know, stationery and all sorts of things that are going to be handed around, even if it's in that bubble of 12 children or 15 children, whatever the Department of Education decides in the end, you know, and that you stick together, actually, you know, what if your teacher is diabetic? You know, you don't necessarily know whether your teacher's diabetic, but we've just talked about who is susceptible, more likely to COVID than others. What if you're overweight? What if you have one? You know, what?
Well, it applies to everybody, whether they're travelling on public transport, whether they're teachers. Of course, their risk is nothing like the risk to frontline workers in hospitals and care homes.
But then teachers won't have any PPE either.
No, they won't. And many people in hospitals don't have sufficient PPE or in care homes. But what we do know, what the science does tell us, is that children are transmitting the virus less than others. And if we
do we know
can
that
have
then?
smaller
We definitely know that children don't.
The evidence is pretty strong around the world that children are not only more resilient to the virus, but they tend to transmit it to other people less than adults do. So that if you're working with children, the risk is lower. But I do understand the concerns of teachers that if classrooms are big, if children can't socially distance, if they're sharing meals together, all of which can be mitigated, by the way, then there's a potential risk and it needs to be worked out.